EVs have brought some of the most radical changes in the automotive industry, but no, this time we don't think of the powertrain, batteries, or zero emissions. What comes to our mind is the new order in the industry. Considering that the latest technological achievements and the production of competitive vehicles are no longer reserved for Western countries and the renowned automakers, this is the new world, where the biggest threat is coming from the East, so big that it could potentially obliterate legacy car makers that have been ruling this industry for over a century. Does the Chinese EV industry really have the capacity to take over the world? That's what we'll try to find out in this video, so make sure to stay with us until the end. It all started in the early 21st century when the Chinese Communist Party made a comprehensive plan to become a global technological superpower. Of course, that plan included the automotive sector, and from the start, Chinese officials were perfectly aware that they had no chance of competing with Western companies in terms of internal combustion engine technology. That's something legacy car makers from the West have been perfecting for decades, so only to catch up would take way too much time and effort. It was a perfect time to start pushing the new technology, electric cars. None of the legacy car makers had experience with these, so China's administration set a pretty clear goal: to establish its position before the West. And over the previous decade, we saw a significant leap. As usual, the beginnings were pretty humble. Back in 2011, Elon Musk used a pretty underestimating tone to describe the Chinese EV industry. When asked about competition from BYD, he actually laughed and responded with words like, "Have you seen their cars? You don't see them at all as a competitor. I don't think they have a great product." In the next 13 years, things changed radically. The Chinese government started giving massive incentives to EV startups. The idea was to establish as many startups as possible, as quantity inevitably leads to quality. By 2017, the number of registered EV companies went to over 500, so the government knew it was time for the next stage. It was time for the elimination stage. The criteria for getting incentives would be becoming significantly higher, so eventually only the best would survive. Today, the number of registered EV makers in China is around 90, but experts believe that in just a few years, that number is going to come down to a few, because already today, the top 10 EV makers hold more than 80% of the domestic market. Today, Musk doesn't use a sarcastic tone to describe Chinese EVs anymore. Instead, he stated in January that Chinese car companies are the most competitive in the world and that he thinks they will have significant success outside China. He also stated that if there were no import and other barriers, Chinese EV companies would already obliterate legacy car makers from the West. When we compare modest beginnings from just a little bit over a decade ago and today's position on the market of Chinese EV makers, the growth seems beyond surreal. Back in 2012, Chinese EV makers had a minor share of the global market of just 0.1%. Today, Chinese EV companies account for over 60% of global EV sales, with a clear tendency to continue growing. Out of the world's top 5 EV makers, 3 are from China. BYD accounts for 17% of the global market and holds second place, right behind Tesla, which makes nearly 20% of the global EV sales. Still, there is a big chance that this gap will get smaller in the near future and that BYD could easily overthrow the Austin-based company, considering that Tesla's first quarter sales went down by a huge 20%. Tesla's struggle is particularly notable in the Chinese market, where the sales figures are over 40% lower compared to the same period last year. As for the rest of the top 5 global EV leaders, the third place belongs to GAC Aeon, which accounts for 5.2% of the market, while fourth place, SAIC GM Wuling, holds 4.9% of the market. Finally, the fifth place belongs to the biggest European automaker, Volkswagen, which controls 4.6% of the global EV market. We already talked about the further growth of Chinese EV dominance, and one of the key reasons may also be that major companies like Huawei and Xiaomi have also entered the car-making business, even though their primary occupation is smartphones and other high-tech products in consumer electronics. Huawei launched its first EV months ago, while Xiaomi just presented its first, the SU7, which has all it needs to compete with the Tesla Model S, only with a significantly lower price. Government support makes the difference. That's what we can offer, hear from experts, considering that the Chinese administration takes a little bit different approach when it comes to electrification. namely in Western countries. Incentives usually come in the form of tax credits. For example, Biden's administration bought the so-called U.S. Inflation Reduction Act in 2022, where customers get tax credits for new EVs between $3,750 and $7,500. Things on the European markets aren't significantly different either. On the other hand, the Chinese government has just brought a new act, and according to it, Chinese buyers don't pay taxes at all on fully electric vehicles that can make at least 200 kilometers or 124 miles per charge. That plan was introduced last year, and it includes a massive $72 billion package of sales tax breaks for the next 4 years. In 2024, tax breaks will go up to $4,144, which may not be as generous as in North America, but on the other hand, let's not forget that EVs are significantly cheaper in China than in the US, which we will talk about in a few moments. But what sets the Chinese approach apart is the active support of EV makers. We already talked about incentives the government has been giving during the last decade. Now, things have gone to a new stage where the elimination process is ongoing. The criteria to get incentives are higher, and the government is now focusing on the major players. For example, the Chinese government granted subsidies worth over $3.7 billion to BYD, the country's largest EV maker, just to overcome the sales slowdown that occurred in the first quarter of this year. But that's just a tiny part of the government's involvement in the EV industry. With China, things go way beyond car production. China has managed to close the full production circle, as pretty much the entire manufacturing process is run by Chinese companies. This starts with raw materials, and we know how expensive they are. Well, the Chinese EV companies control most of the world's reserves of rare earth materials such as lithium and cobalt, which are essential for the production of batteries, drivetrains, and other critical parts. Chinese companies own mines all over the world, and according to some sources, they control more than 90% of the rare earth materials in the way that they either own mines or process these materials in mines around the world. When combined with the aforementioned incentives, as well as the labor cost in China, it becomes pretty obvious why Chinese EV makers offer their models at significantly lower prices. Unlike the Western legacy car makers that still lose thousands on every EV they make, Chinese companies actually cracked the EV economy, and they make a profit. Before we get on the Chinese global EV expansion and its challenges, let's take a look at some of the most interesting models that could potentially become global leaders in the near future. The Chinese EV industry is huge, and it includes an impressive range of models, from the cheapest in the world to some of the most technologically advanced. So let's take a quick look at some of them. As mentioned, BYD is the largest EV maker in China, and one of the interesting models in its range is called Dolphin Mini. With tiny dimensions, respectable range, and advanced tech, it is a natural choice for anyone looking for an affordable EV. And this one is really cheap, considering that the price in China starts at under $10,000. That's the price on the domestic market. As for the rest of the world, things are not all that affordable. In Mexico, which is the closest Chinese EV maker to the United States, the same model starts at around $21,000. But even that is significantly cheaper compared to the Nissan Leaf, which is one of the cheapest EVs you can buy in America, with a starting price of around $29,000. Then there is a model called the Wuling Mini EV, which is one of the most popular EVs in China, thanks to its super affordable price that goes around $4,500. At the other end of the spectrum, there is a model called XPeng G9, which stands as one of the most technologically advanced EVs on the market. With LiDAR-based systems, impressive 800-volt architecture, and fast charging, its own operating system with over-the-air updates, AI-powered assistance, and many more. Most importantly, it features an impressive autonomy that goes way over 400 miles per charge. The BYD One Plus is another interesting model from the Chinese leading EV company, which starts at just $16,500 on the domestic market, which is more than 2 times lower compared to the Tesla Model Y, for example, which starts at around $35,000 on this market, and that's only because of the ongoing price war in China. In other parts of the world, such as the US, the Model Y is $10,000 more expensive. Finally, let's get back to the Xiaomi SU7 again and its attractive price tag that starts slightly under $30,000. This model has not yet been sold outside China, but even with a notably higher price tag, it still has a potential to become a bestseller, considering that it's designed to compete with a significantly more expensive Tesla Model S. For comparison, even the notably smaller Tesla Model 3 starts at around $39,000 in the US. With all we've said so far, it's pretty obvious that Chinese EV companies have a competitive advantage over Western legacy makers. They know how to make EVs cheaper, and they get massive help from the Chinese government. But at the same time, Chinese expansion to Western markets is still not happening. Most Chinese EV makers still haven't established their position in Europe and America. Moreover, even a company like BYD, the world's second largest EV maker, struggles, and at the moment, 95% of its sales are on the domestic market. What's happening here is that, as you would expect, Western countries don't want to lose their automotive industry, so they are figuring out how to put new barriers on Chinese companies. In Brussels and Washington, the Chinese EV expansion has been a hot topic for years, and it is seen as a part of the bigger process, as part of China's aspiration to dominate in international trade. The European Union already started an investigation of Chinese EV companies and, as the European Commission likes to call it, those unfairly benefit from subsidies. The main question is whether European Union should impose new tariffs on car manufacturers from China. At the moment, Chinese EV makers are treated the same way as any other abroad automaker, so there is nothing more than a typical 10% import tax. On the other hand, America imposed trade barriers during the Trump administration, which came with a 25% tariff on Chinese EVs long ago. And that's probably the main reason why major Chinese companies still can't expand to this continent. On the other hand, Chinese automakers are figuring out new ways to avoid, or better say, slip around these barriers. Of course, the most effective way is to establish production lines in these parts of the world, so it doesn't surprise that BYD plans to build a factory in Hungary. In North America, companies like BYD, Chery, and SAIC are all in negotiations with Mexican authorities and plan to build plants in the near future and take advantage of bilateral trade agreements that Mexico and the United States have. Chinese EVs pose a risk to our national security. Those are the words we heard from President Biden in his statement a while ago when the U.S. Department of Commerce said that it is considering a probe into whether Chinese cars pose a national security risk. Biden also added that with these EVs, China can collect sensitive data about American citizens and infrastructure and send it back to China. And while this definitely sounds like a typical political populism, the fact is that electric vehicles are based on advanced technology. We are talking about things like semiconductors, autonomous driving, navigation, and connectivity features. Experts suggest that this could also mean that China has the potential to remotely control these vehicles, for example. Moreover, they say that these EVs can also give access to personal data and send it to Beijing. In the UK, Sir Richard Delove, a former MIS head, insists on banning these vehicles from sensitive national infrastructure and compares it to Huawei in the way that it should be banned the same way Huawei's 5G network was banned for safety reasons. From the perspective of potential customers, one of the main concerns about Chinese EVs is their quality. With our experience with the various products from China, it's needless to say that they weren't always of the best quality. But things started to change lately. Smartphones and other consumer electronics are the best examples, as companies like Huawei and Xiaomi are among the leaders when it comes to product quality, customer satisfaction, etc. Since Chinese EVs still haven't been sold in large numbers in Western countries, we can only refer to Chinese sources, and one of them is the 12365 Auto. This Chinese website uses a system that counts the number of faults per 10,000 vehicles and monitors car quality in that way. And according to the source, Tesla remains at the top position on the Chinese market, but compared to results from just a few years ago, the difference in faults between Tesla and Chinese competitors has become marginal. This indicates that Chinese EVs feature more than satisfying overall quality, and the fact that they can be comparable with Tesla says a lot, because the Austin-based company is the only EV maker that features an average reliability rating when compared to internal combustion cars. On the other hand, Legacy car makers have huge problems with EVs, and most of their models finish at the bottom of any customer satisfaction list. After all, we can always refer to the massive survey by Consumer Reports, which includes more than 330,000 vehicles produced between 2000 and 2023. According to this survey, EVs caused 80% more problems than gas-powered cars. While Tesla stands pretty impressive in terms of customer satisfaction, legacy automakers are facing major issues on so many fronts. GM, Ford, and other legacy car makers have had so many problems with quality of their EVs, so it's pretty safe to say that Chinese EVs have a lot to offer in terms of quality and successfully compete with most Western automakers. The future of EVs is still a little bit unclear. After a few years of impressive growth rate, things slowed down a bit lately, which suggests that the middle class is still not ready to embrace all-electric technology. Simply, EVs are still more expensive than gas-powered cars, while running costs are much higher than experts suggested due to high insurance premiums, high repair costs, etc. With all this in mind, it's more likely that when we talked about the midterm future, EVs won't become the most dominant type of vehicles on the road. But on the other hand, they have all it takes to become the main options for short-distance mobility in urban areas. What's important to say is that EVs are expected to become much more affordable in the following years because essential rare earth materials like lithium are becoming cheaper to mine. Currently, batteries take around 30% of the total manufacturing costs, but by the end of the next decade, that percentage is expected to go around 15 to 20%, experts suggest, which will certainly have a big impact on the overall vehicle cost. Also, it's worth mentioning that while the European and American EV markets no longer grow at rapid speed, that's not the case in markets like India, where we saw a massive 91% year-over-year increase. Other markets have the potential to grow as well, but it's irrational to expect EVs to account for the majority of the global car market anytime soon. Instead, as mentioned, EVs will most likely become a major force in urban areas, with decent range figures and reasonable prices. And as we talk about reasonable prices, that's currently the biggest worry of Western legacy car makers, because they can't compete with Chinese companies in this aspect. So in the end, the Chinese EV expansion will mostly depend on the ability of legacy automakers to optimize production, reduce costs, and create a sustainable business model. If you watched until now, you're clearly passionate about staying informed. Why not continue your journey with this next video we've lined up for you? See you there.